Testing.
If you'll give us just a few minutes, we're getting everybody logged in up here.
Good morning, everybody. It's 9:04 a.m. and we'll start the Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting. Today is October the 11th, 2023, meeting of the Bricktown Urban Design Committee. My name is Ophelia Cancio and I'm the chair of the committee. When called on, applicants and speakers will come forward to the front podium to speak. Only one person at a time should come to the podium. Please speak into the microphone, identify yourself, and provide your address for the record when you begin speaking. Address your comments to the committee. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Citizens may address the committee on agenda items by responding to chair's call for speakers during discussion on each item and signing the speaker's logon podium. All comments must be relevant to the item being heard. The chair or presiding officer may, in his or her discretion, prohibit a person from addressing the committee and/or remove that person from the council chambers if that person commits any disorderly or disruptive behavior. Please refer to the meeting agenda for more information about these requirements. If you're parked in the Sheridan Walker parking garage north of John Rex Elementary School or in the Arts District parking garage, which is just south of City Hall, staff can provide you with parking validation ticket. The agenda and documents are located at the okc.prime.gov website. You would select the Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting. Once there, you would then click on the agenda item and the related documents will come up below the item. Keith, will you please call roll?
Cancio,
Present.
Wall, Dodson. Present. Egan,
Here.
McCown, Scaramucci,
Present.
Thompson.
Present.
We have quorum.
Wonderful. Second item on the agenda will be approval of the December 14, 22 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Thompson and second by Dodson.
Scaramucci, what was your vote, please?
Okay, motion passes. Cases withdrawn, none. Continuance request, none. Consent docket, we have none. Cases for individual consideration. Michael, would you like to tell us about these cases, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This item is BCA 23-00007. It is located at 100 East California on the south side of the Bricktown Canal, just east of Oklahoma Avenue. This application before you today is a little bit different than anything the committee's seen in quite some time. I've been here on staff for over 11 years, and there's only been one other case I can think of since I've been here that had proposed a new building on the canal, that being Brickopolis. So what you have before you is a significant proposal for a new hotel, a boutique hotel on the south side of the canal. In addition, the other thing that makes it a little bit unique is that it's a combination proposal for a demolition and/or addition. And the reason that's been done here is because there are guidelines that are contained in the Building Conservation and Rehabilitation Guidelines that the city and the Bricktown Committee has adopted that would apply to the addition that would make it pretty impossible to comply with those guidelines given the proposal you have before you now. Those guidelines talk about minimizing the visual appearance of the addition in relationship to the existing building. And here we have a proposal to add 5 stories to a 2-story building. So if they want to stay at 7 stories, you're not going to be able to make that guideline. So in the possibility that the committee could not find in support of those guidelines for the addition, the alternative that the applicant is proposing is that there's a proposal to, instead of adding to the building, would be to demolish the existing building and just start from the ground up with a new project altogether. And that's why there's a little bit of overlap in some of the discussion in the staff report. I guess to get started, and it's almost like jumping to the end of the report, we have recommended a continuance for this project. It's a substantial continuance because of the laundry list of things that have been left not completely addressed by the applicant at the time of the writing of this report. I do want to back up, though, on the demolition proposal aspect of this. We did receive an engineering report from the applicant on this, the stability of the existing building yesterday afternoon, and that report was distributed to the committee yesterday afternoon. We don't expect that you've had a time or any chance to fully read it in detail, but we did advise you in our email correspondence that the conclusions of the report were contained on page 6 and 7 of the report. And it is clear that from that report that there are some pretty significant stability considerations and concerns over the existing building, and those would need to be addressed one way or the other to avoid any kind of threat to public safety, particularly on the frontage that is adjacent to Wanda Jackson Way on the south side of the building. So back to what I was saying earlier, we've recommended continuance because there's a lot of things that have been left unaddressed by the applicant. We've itemized those for you in the staff report, starting on page 2, and I'll just run through those real quickly. Number 1, there's no room on the site because it's a 100% lot coverage for inclusion of a trash enclosure. They have discussed the possibility of providing an enclosure off-site, but we don't, as at this time, we don't have any indication of where that might be or who might permit them to put that facility on their property, so on and so forth. We would, to approve this project without that, we would probably need a companion application simultaneously that approved that trash enclosure off-site in a nearby location to facilitate operation of their trash collection and disposal. Secondarily, there is a canopy proposed, arrival entry canopy proposed at the south side of the building over Wander Jackson Way. That is a public right-of-way. We have a lot of concerns about whether or not it's even possible to build a canopy over that right-of-way, and if so, would the canopy they've shown us meet any of the standards that Public Works would have for such a covering? And we have yet to hear anything from Public Works as to whether or not that would be acceptable. One option the applicant has discussed with staff with respect to that particular aspect of the project is that they have considered the possibility of proposing a closure of that right-of-way from Oklahoma over to Mickey Mantle Drive, and that would take it out of the realm of public right-of-way and open up a lot of opportunities for them, but we haven't seen any proposal for that at this point in time either. There is also a proposed cantilevered pool that sticks out from the north side of the building over an easement that the city has for the canal maintenance and operations. We've got no indication from the Parks Department as to whether or not they have any issues or concerns with that proposed extension, and we don't know operationally how any of that would work. They did have some, I think, some 6-foot-tall glass screens that would prevent water from spilling out of the pool down to the canal level, so that's a good thing that they have addressed. But again, we don't know that there's any issues with the way that the easement is currently written that would allow that to happen. The roof has unusual topping feature to it, I guess you'd call it, and it extends beyond the footprint of the building in all 4 directions. So you have a roof that extends to the east and west by about 4 feet onto adjacent property owners' property, and we have no indication from those adjacent property owners whether or not that's an acceptable opportunity for them. And by the same token, we have that same roof sticking out to the north and to the south over a public easement for the canal on the north and over a public right-of-way to the south for Wander Jackson Way. And again, we have no indication from either Public Works or from Parks and Rec Department as to whether or not they have any issues with those extensions. And that's not to mention questions like, well, when you have a roof like that, how does the drip line work? You know, when the water falls in the rain, and we're not sure how any of that is going to function either. Also, you'll notice in the floor plans for the project at the 4th level, there is a double door opening to the west that is intended to tie into the 4th floor of the Kingman building next door to the west. The applicant has informed us that they're in negotiations or discussions with the owner of the Kingman building is to possibly lease the 4th floor of the Kingman building as an event center that would be tied into this proposed hotel, which makes a lot of sense, but we have no indication from that property owner whether or not there's been any agreements signed or executed that would allow that to happen. So what we have is a floor plan that has doors opening into a wall, and it's kind of difficult for us to approve that kind of situation when we don't know if there's any agreements to allow that to happen. On top of this laundry list of things that I would call loose ends that have yet to be defined and detailed, we have also worked with the applicant and discussed on a number of occasions the design of the roof overall, because the Bricktown guidelines talk about having a roof that has a flat appearance to it, like most of the other buildings in Bricktown do. And while this is generally flat, there is a little bit of a curvature on this roof element that we're a little concerned about, and we feel like, we understand that they're trying to highlight the building and make it stand out, but we feel there's probably other ways to do that without the whoop-de-doo of the roof that they've got going on here. So that's one issue. And then the other is, again, from the Building Conservation and Rehabilitation Guidelines, and that's with respect to whether they're going to add on to the building as it is, or if they're going to demolish the building and rebuild. The guidelines talk about trying to replicate significant architectural features of the existing building in either option. And in this respect, there's not much to replicate on the east side because it's a big concrete block wall. But on the north and the south side, there are some minor features that could be replicated with a little bit of work in the architecture on the new project. On the north side, we have a parapet wall at the top of the second story that could be recessed a little bit or protruded out to replicate that. And then on the south side, there are loft-style warehouse windows that face One Jackson Way. And for those first two stories of the new building, whether it be an addition or whether it be a full tear down and building a new building, we feel that there is an opportunity to try and maybe not match the size, but at least match the look of those types of windows at those first two floors, and then change for the rest of the floors going up above that. So, in conclusion, with all of these issues flying around and a lot of loose ends that we don't have a lot of answers to, we felt it was appropriate to make a recommendation for a continuance to this item. Our continuance, the date we've chosen is into the January meeting, which is extensive continuance. That's open for discussion between the committee and the applicant. We feel we made that recommendation for the 3 months because of the amount of items there are to get through and resolve, and also because we're coming into the holiday period of time when there's not a lot of people available here and there, and people get busy with various things, and it's difficult to get things resolved. At the very minimum, yesterday was the deadline for the November meeting, so continuing this to November with so many things left to be resolved, in our opinion, would be not feasible. So the next available meeting would be the December meeting, if you wanted to continue it. And then again, like I said, we think it's more appropriate to continue to January with so many things to be resolved. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm prepared to respond to any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for the extensive staff report. It's clear you guys put a lot of effort into reviewing the report and making these considerations, so appreciate that. Just as far as the timing goes, it sounds like you raised, I understand the continuance desire or intent there, recommendation. Is it a matter of these conversations having been started and the fact that you think it'll take time? Or I guess I'm just a little confused on process-wise, like why some of these things would not have been addressed, or is this how they normally would be addressed as far as Public Works and Parks Department?
Actually, this project came into us out of left field. We had no contact prior to the submittal date, really, or very little. And for a project like this, I think we would normally have expected a lot of pre-application coordination. Okay. And we didn't get that. Okay. But even with that being said, we did meet face-to-face with the applicant once, I believe, either shortly before the submittal or very shortly after. And we did talk about a lot of the things that are addressed in the report. And then, in addition to that, the report was made available to the applicant at the same time that you got it last week. And aside from the engineering report, which we received yesterday, we haven't really received any new information that addresses any of the information or that's missing, in our opinion.
Yep, thanks.
Yes?
Could you just clarify for me on air rights? Is the same rules and regulations applicable to air rights?
That's what we don't know.
Okay,
We've been, in our opinion, it's not our responsibility to coordinate with the Public Works Department to figure that out, or to coordinate with Public Works. We've encouraged the applicant to make contacts with both of those departments to work out the details of whether or not those departments feel that those extensions they're proposing in this project are feasible, and if they are feasible, under what standards would they have to meet? And at this point, we have had no contact from any representation from either Public Works or Parks and Rec Department.
I know of very few instances in Bricktown where air rights have been purchased by the property owner, but that is not what has happened.
If that's
here.
happened, we have not been made aware of that.
No, I'm talking about in past
Oh, okay,
years.
right.
That has, you
No,
don't know if that's
No,
happened
it
on
wouldn't
this.
surprise me if it's, I guess, feasible or allowed, I
Okay.
guess. But allowing it is one thing, making sure it complies with whatever regulations or
Right.
concerns those entities have is another. And we haven't had that coordination yet.
Okay, thank you.
Does the applicant feel like they can have items addressed that are concerned and answers to the questions by the December?
I'm going to let the applicant respond to that, but in our interactions with the applicant on all of these issues, they've indicated that there's a lot of discussions and meetings and agreements that are possibly in the works, or proposals that they might pursue in the future, and other things that they've said that are very close to being done, but we've had no executed proof of those agreements being done. So there's a lot of moving parts to this project, and we just normally would, when we bring an item before the committee, we would normally like to have those things all nailed down. But the applicant really did want to come before the committee today and make a presentation, so that we've gone ahead and facilitated that, but we've had to point out the list of items that are still yet to be resolved.
Okay, the applicant can have any comments?
Hi, my name is Jose Rodriguez, and I'm in the design team, and I represent Gem Industries. So this is, for the record, 108 East California Avenue, the property that we're talking about. As far as your question goes, we started this process back in July, and we did contact the office for the Bricktown that I was asking if we could meet in person. They told me that we needed to get the application, which Michael did send it to us. We were in the process of acquiring the property, so right now we're under contract. We have 90-day due diligence to do all the surveys that required for the seller and the buyer as well. And so we have done that. We went through the geotech, the building condition, which is the report that you guys got yesterday, along with other surveys required. The building itself, the property, it's a 3-level, including the basement on the canal level. It's in really bad shape. I'm sure if you read the report, you'll be able to see that. Recommendations from the structural engineers that performed the survey, the assessment, is that it would be a lot more challenging to try and maintain the envelope. which is really the only item that we were wanting to maintain the envelope for the building. We were already planning on demoing the interior column grid, the intermediate floors, which they're cracked, it's concrete, and the roof, which has a huge hole and it doesn't, it's falling apart. So initially we're thinking about keeping the envelope, but after we had it assessed, the wall on the east side, it's not the original wall, it's CMU that was placed later. I'm not sure when exactly, but it's not a load-bearing wall. It's just there. It's cracks. You can see if you go to the basement or the other floors, you can see the light coming from the outside. All the floors, the wall on the south end, if you read the report, it's in pretty dire straight, condition that because of the roof, the bad condition of the roof, that south wall can collapse really in a short period of time, according to the structural engineers. So now our approach is that we basically demo the whole structure. There's nothing really on the south facade as far as the brick goes that we can keep. It's all in bad shape. On the north facade, the brick that is there, we can't really replace it. There's nothing that we can match it to. There's some patching going on. The brick is painted as well. So we really don't see, safety-wise, which is our first concern, we don't see that it would be a benefit to keep the existing structure. As far as the timeline goes, we are trying to, this meeting is important and critical in our moving forward because it will dictate how we start the construction documentation for this project. So that's really a turning point for us. We would, as far as the time frame, we would get the drawings done within 8 weeks, to answer your question. So if we were approved today, for example, we are hoping that in 4 weeks we have schematic design and design development phase done in 4 weeks. And then in 4 weeks after that, we have construction documentation ready to submit for a building permit. We have already coordinated with plan review, also with Parks and Recreation and Public Works, as far as all the other items that were mentioned by Michael. For example, the pool, the cantilever is 10 feet from the building perimeter. The signage on both the south end of the building and also on the north end on the canal. We talked to plan review as well, all the departments. The overhang on the sides on the west and east are 4 foot on the neighboring properties, 16 feet on the south on that side of the building, and then on the north is about 9-10 feet. We also discussed the trash enclosure with the city, and also the entry canopy on the south end of the building. So the answer from plan review was they came and looked at it, and they looked at all the plans and all the items that we had on the list. They said it wouldn't be an issue as long as we submit for a revocable permit. And that would be when we submit for a building permit at that point. Parks and Recreation, we discussed all the items pertaining to them. There were some items regarding some planters that we have on the canal side of things. Everything else, they walked the property with us, and they were fine with everything else. We did discuss the pool area. They didn't seem they were concerned about any potential water leakage from, spillage from the pool. We would have 6 to 8 feet height railings on the pool area, on the roof area, where you have the pool and the lounging area for that part of the building. As far as the leakage or any water leaking from the building, the rooftop, the slope, it's an interior drainage that we're going to have on the roof. So that would be addressing that item. The enclosure, at this point, we're in conversations with the neighboring building ownership for the Kingman. And it's almost not exactly in front of our entry for the hotel, but it's a little bit catty corner, more to the east. But they had already been considering relocating that to another area of their parking lot, which is right across from their building as well. And it would be a joint venture. We did discuss that with Michael, and we know that it would be a separate permit that we would have to apply, and it would probably have to be done through the Kingmanship ownership because it would be on their property. But we would be also assisting them in that aspect. The canopy, the entry point, again, it's part of the plan review. We went through every single item, and they say it would be okay. I know Michael mentioned something about closing that alleyway or that street. We're more than open to any suggestions, any direction from the committee or the city. We're more than willing to cooperate with everybody, and we're flexible as well. I think as far as all those departments that we talked to in the city, they're very forthcoming, they're excited about the project and willing to help us out and cooperate with us. And as far as our side, like I said, we're very flexible. But yes, our timeline, the faster for us to tackle some of these items would be beneficial to us. I should mention, the ownership for the Kingman building knows about what we're doing. We're actually working on the LOI from them to lease the 4th floor, which is about 11,000 square feet that we're going to be using for an event center, that we will be penetrating, creating firewall and entry point on that level. So they're fine with that. They're fine with us overlapping 4 foot on the overhang for the roof. We are also in conversations and in negotiations actually to acquire the Brickopolis building along with the mini golf area next door. So that would be potentially, hopefully, part of our property as well. So as far as overlapping anything to the east, as we're trying to acquire that property as well. So we're working on every item that was mentioned by Michael that's before you. And like I said, we're hoping that we can move forward with this project pretty quick.
Thank you for the clarification on that, Jose. I did have a couple of questions, and then if any of the other committee members had any comments or questions, just you mentioned that you guys are trying to acquire that property to the east. Is that something that would be solidified before the continuing of this building, or is that something that would be after, or what is your anticipation there?
That's a parallel deal that we're doing. So it's independent from the one that we're addressing right now,
Okay.
but we're hoping that within the next weeks, it's also resolved as far as the Brickopolis and the mini golf. So.
Okay. And then, I don't know if anybody had any questions or comments on that, but the second question I had was, I understand that the structural integrity of the building is, compromised, and it's difficult to try to maintain that, but is there any additional efforts that the architecture design has done to maintain the characteristic of the building that was there, or other than it being brick in Bricktown, any characteristics of the architecture in the Bricktown area?
We have had conversations. Obviously, on the east, there's really nothing. There's no brick. It's just a CMU wall that is damaged. On the south, it's pretty in bad shape. I mean, there's a lot of water damage on the brick and the concrete as well. Because of the elevation design that we're proposing on the south side, it doesn't really allow for anything to be maintained as far as design goes. On the north facade, which is really what faces the more historical context, there will be, what we're trying to do is from the level at the canal, and I guess I can point to it. You can see the first two levels, which is the canal and then the boardwalk level. That would be a different brick, which is kind of, we're trying to not mimic, but kind of stay within the same shade of darkness of brick as the brick up, the Kingman building. And then from there on, the midsection of the building, it's more of an orange brick, which also it's, I mean, if you go over there, there's like just in the first 3-4 buildings across our property, there's like 8 different brick colors and textures. So we're trying to maintain that with those two, kind of the original colors of a brick, right? And then above that, we would have the 2 levels above that, we would have a metal panel, which is a millennium tile, which is that size. This one here. Which it actually changes color, not changes color, but the hue changes depending on where you're standing and how the sun hits it. And we wanted to have a little bit more of a contemporary feel once you get up on the upper levels. The roof overhang would be the 2 tiles in the middle, which it creates like a different, checkerboard kind of thing design on it. And then, again, it kind of changes the colors depending on where the sun is hitting and where you're standing. These are the 2 different colors of the brick. This would be the base, this would be the midsection. Our building, the parapet line for the 2nd floor would be somewhere in this area. So it's a little bit hard for us to kind of keep that brick that is there, existing brick, which is really painted. So we're trying to maintain some type of identity or take one element and make it part of that precedence, right? But it's so hard because the building it's in such a bad shape. There's really no design elements that are very significant or that pop out aside from your parapet. And your parapet, even your parapet, it doesn't really stand out in a way that we can say, well, here's something that we can use and say it's a time capsule, right? So,
Did you want to go through your presentation?
That's all right.
No?
No.
Okay.
Any comments?
Yeah, I have several. I wanted to make sure I understood a couple of the things. So when we're talking about materials, it's maybe easier to look at the posters that you have. So on the bottom, we're saying that there would be brick. So canal level and then 1st floor. So then on floors 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, what is that material?
It's that brick right there.
Okay, all right. That's I just wasn't sure because I guess I couldn't tell. So then once you get up to, I guess it'd be like the 6th floor. Is that where you're proposing the metal panels?
So the 7th floor and then the 8th floor. The 8th floor is where we have, on the 8th floor, we have basically your presidential suite, which is about 1,000, which it faces the south, right? And then we have a fitness center, which faces the pool, right?
Sure,
The
sure.
south, the north part of the building. And then you have the pool, the infinity pool with the lounging area, the cabanas, and then there's also an outdoor bar area as well. So those 2 would be this metal panel.
Yeah, got it. Okay, that helps a lot. So then,
I do want to jump in and say that the packet in front of you has 2 options for this brick and metal combination. The applicant's proposal, their option A, their preferred choice is to have both the 6th and 7th floor in the metal, clad in the metal material. We suggested to the applicant that that might be a little too much for the committee. So the option B that's also in your package is just having the 7th floor in that metal material, and then floors 1 through 6 would be in the brick.
And what you see, these bands here running vertically and horizontal, that would be this metal panel, which is kind of the same tile size.
Okay, thanks. So then also, can you speak to the material for I guess it's 8th floor is where we're at now? So those other sort of structural members, is that glass? And then that metal that you're referring to, is that, would that?
This is painted metal.
Okay, that's also like painted metal. I guess, is that a part of what was submitted in the design as far as those materials?
Yeah, the items that we have as white there is tied back to the windows, which across all the buildings in Bricktown have white frame wall windows frames. So we wanted to do a play off of that and kind of tie that, and so all these are part of the structural frames that hold up the railings, the glass bottom on the top roof level.
And then is the member that would, I guess, be at that top level below the glass, is that this gray metal panel as well? It's hard for me to kind of see what the.
So this would be this metal right here.
Okay. And then also the bands that you're talking about, those vertical bands.
You can probably see that on this.
Yeah, okay.
It would be this band, and it basically separates some of the
Sure.
materials. This band, and then this one, and then also on the south side. It's
All right.
narrow image, basically.
Yeah. Then can you talk us through a little bit of the roof, the thoughts on the roof design?
Yeah, so the roof material, it's steel frame, and so it would be cladded with those two metal panels in the middle. If I can give you this real quick. That's
Yep.
that metal panel in that building. They only use it in the elevation.
Yep. Yep. So your thoughts on that design, and I guess I wanted to get the questions, and then I will give some commentary, I guess, or at least my perspective on some of the things that have been presented. But I was wanting to understand your thoughts on the design. Obviously, it's a departure from the historic area. So like maybe if you were in the south part of Bricktown, like other side of Reno, you see some of these kinds of things, but it's a departure from either standing seam roof that we have in some of the features or the flat roofs. Mm-hmm. So I was curious about you all's approach or thought to that in regards to how it fits in with the sort of historic character of the
So
neighborhood.
design-wise, we know that, for example, the Renaissance building, which is one of the latest buildings, it has its brick, some brick patches, and a more contemporary approach in some of those elements. What we wanted to do is we wanted to make the statement that, yes, we're using brick. This is the base brick, traditional brick, and we go from the base and mix section. As you get higher, we wanted to marry that with something a little bit more contemporary, obviously. So the colors that we're using for the roof overhang, for example, it's a combination. It's more a contemporary take on all the collage that you have of all the brick buildings in front of us. So you take the reds, you take the oranges, and so what we created is a collage of the burgundy, more of the gold and bronze look, but in more contemporary composition as you go up higher than your midsection of the brick.
And then last question that I have is maybe for staff, but it's so some of the concerns, and I'm just thinking about what we're considering right today. So our responsibility, I think, is to interpret the urban design guidelines in regards to the exterior features, I think with like minimal consideration for how that factors into the overall function of the building, right? And so in that case, I mean, how much should we be concerned as far as scope with overhangs and things of that nature? Like in theory, I think it's the building owners, like the next door building owners problem. Like we could approve something that had an overhang that went all the way across the canal. It might, I mean, if we thought it looked nice, right? Or should we be considering the fact that something that spanned a cantilever across the canal has not been sort of approved or reviewed, or there's not a concession from Parks Department?
Okay, theoretically, you could approve it like it is. And if they end up running into problems getting permission for either the east or west side or the north or south side, they would have to come back for a revision to their approval to pull back those overhangs where they can't get permission to do it. So theoretically, they could do that. Same would go for the opening to the 4th floor at the Kingman Building. If we approve it as it is today, which is kind of weird since it opens into a wall, and they don't get permission to either lease that space or buy the building or whatever they want to do, so that connection would make any sense, they would have to come back and get a revision to their approval so that on the 4th floor, they would submit a new 4th floor floor plan that would eliminate those doors. So anything that we've brought out as an issue that has not been resolved could hypothetically be approved by the commission today. But if they were not able to get whatever approvals that apply to these various elements that have been unresolved, they would have to come back and get a revision to their approval. Now, whether that would come back to staff or come back to the committee, that's something the committee can take into consideration and provide some direction on in their action.
I'll add the one thing that I don't think we can issue a CA for is work that extends over the property line onto someone else's property. We can't give you permission to do work that is not on your own property. When it's right-of-way stuff, we can work through that with plan review and with Public Works, but when it's an adjacent property owner, we would have to ask them to revise the design so that it does not overhang the property line to the east and the west, or to provide some sort of documentation that they have the authorization to do that. And I'll let legal weigh in if there's more information on that, but that's my understanding.
Typically, canopies can overhang the sidewalk by 6 feet. You can also negotiate with the city for a further extension, but in overhanging private property, which I understand the mini golf course is on the other side of it, there would need to be some sort of agreement from the owners of the mini golf course.
And also from the Kingman as well.
All right, that's very helpful, because that will allow me to, I think, color what I would say is commentary. So those are my questions, so I'm going to go ahead and give my thoughts on what's been presented. I think that I would not be inclined to approve a design without the consent of the adjacent property owners that overhung or infringed on their sort of property lines. I think probably similarly would have concerns about the door. And these seems like relatively minor things, because one way or the other, you probably have to come and get them reconsidered. Like, I think from our purview of considering the exterior, that's obviously an exterior wall, a door going into a wall. I'd probably want to see that exterior door and what the connection looked like to the other building, which obviously couldn't be facilitated until that sort of transaction or that is sort of closed and considered. So those things are sort of the broad-based. I think just as far as the more subjective, like review and look at materials, I definitely, I guess my perspective in looking at this, it sounds like we're saying we want to tear down the building. So we've done that plenty of times in Bricktown, but we are also in a historic district. And so if we're going to tear down a building that exists, which is a contrast for me at least to the Renaissance building, which was a parking lot. I mean, at least the starting condition of the project. They took a parking lot and built a building that they essentially wanted to modernize, but really speak to the area and the context of the community that it was in. And I feel like it was a fair compromise. So probably a lot more modern design and all of that, but absolutely conscientious of the urban fabric of this historic district. In this case, if we're demolishing a building because the proposed project, because the building cannot sort of facilitate or accommodate the proposed reuse, that makes sense to me. But I absolutely don't think it's a blank slate. I think we're actually taking this existing condition and figuring out how we're carrying it forward. And from that standpoint, I do think that there are some features of the building that may not be like high design architectural features, but they are the context of Bricktown. Alleyways. I mean, we're literally talking about our warehouse packing district. So it is what it is. It's a bunch of old 1900s sort of brick buildings, and there are alleyways and casement windows and CMU block, right? And that to me is the fabric. So if I think about the design that you guys have proposed, I don't feel like it captures that context of particularly the north and the south facade. So the south facade is a very specific kind of facade. We renamed that alleyway after Wanda Jackson, like, for a reason. I mean, it could not have a name, but it has some significance, I think, to the district. And so when you look at that look, I mean, it's not different than like the Fred Jones building, for example, which is now, I guess it's a Wyndham Hotel, used to be 21C. I mean, it was a stunning feature to sort of bring that out, right? So I would and this is just, again, my subjective sort of feedback and thoughts on the design that's been presented. I do think there are some things to salvage and to nod. And if the idea was so the way you have your design, it's like canal level and then first floor and what you would build back. I almost think canal level and then the first two floors are the opportunity to give those nods and be creative in thinking about the nods to the building that's there. Because if the building was in better structural condition, we would be absolutely saying, not absolutely, we would be largely inclined to preserve the building envelope and build on top of it, which is also something that we've seen happen in adaptive reuse. So, so my general thoughts are that I respect and appreciate the nods to modernize these buildings in the sort of more contemporary context, even though we're in a historic district. I think this building is prominent. I am a big proponent of the idea of this use. I think it will be excellent for the canal and excellent for the district, but I absolutely think it's critical, particularly for the prominence, that it is really thinking about that nod to the historic fabric. And I think you guys have designed a building. I mean, I like the cantilever pool and all that stuff. I kind of like that stuff. Just want to make sure it's done right. Mm-hmm. But I absolutely think, particularly if you look at this presentation, there are nods to both the south and the north side of the building that don't exist in this design that will really be important for me to see try and be recreated to be supportive of the design that's presented.
Go ahead. I had a question about something different, but if you had a comment.
Well, as far as that, your comments go, if you look at that report, not only the structural report that we emailed to you guys, but also these pictures right there, and you're actually standing right in front of that elevation up close and personal, you'll see all the damage there is on the brick itself. That brick does not match the brick in the north facade. That brick, that elevation right there, it's invisible right now to the public. It's almost non-existent. So the only difference as far as contemporary touch that we're doing on that facade at that level is that metallic band that you see here. Everything else is brick all the way to the 6th level. So this is all brick, so there's not, aside from that modernized 2-foot band that goes across, everything else is brick.
Yeah, so I guess I want to clarify what I'm saying is I think that it's not just the brick material, it's the design, right? So, and I'm not an architect. I only vaguely and briefly attempted to be one in college and failed miserably. So, but these window types, right, are not something that's replicated in the design at all. And I'm not again trying to dictate that. I'm just saying there's a nod to that sort of. This is an archetype. I mean, even mixed match brick is an element of Bricktown because the way that these buildings were constructed and grown over time and all. So what that's really what I'm speaking to is that if I look at this south facade. It does not, the facade that you guys have presented does not represent the facade that exists there now.
Well, it can't because it's a different function now. We don't have a warehouse now.
No, I understand. So what I will say though, for me, because I want to quit talking, that's the challenge for me.
Yeah.
Because all of these, I mean, the context of this, of these existing buildings and the context of this neighborhood is a warehouse district. So it's adaptive reuse, and the reason for my comments is even like Brickopolis, for example, that really worked hard to give nod to the community, but that was new construction on empty lots. In this case, we're destroying something that exists to build something on top of it, and there is, in my opinion, no nod or no nod to the historic fabric of what was.
And I totally understand what. I think our turning point was 2 days ago when we got the structural report from the engineers. So first of all, let me address the functionality of the building. It's not a warehouse. The layout of the window openings does not comply with our units for the hotel. There's a rhythm that goes for all of the windows for the units, right? And then there's a lobby entry point. Then how do you screen the lobby area from the alley, right? Right now we have a trash enclosure in front of us. We also have mechanical right across the alley from us. So a lot of those functions in the lobby, we want to make sure that it's attractive and we pull the clientele in architecturally and functionally, right? But we also want to screen them from different things. I mean, you still have homeless coming in and out of that alleyway, right? So some of the, then on the level above that, that's where you start having the suites, right?
Yes, I absolutely understand that. Unfortunately, we have the context of an adaptive reuse of what was not a warehouse, but a manufacturing facility that was turned into a hotel. And I think they addressed all of these challenges and is actually a much larger scale. In this case, I'm only suggesting that if we're going to destroy the building that exists, that we have to have some, not have to, I would like to see some nod to what exists there. That's a design consideration that absolutely will mean less function for a hotel, more form for the context of the community where the hotel is built in. Otherwise, it would make more sense to find an empty lot, in my opinion, and construct this. But now we're talking about this space that is canal front property in this building that has been, most of the buildings in Bricktown have some kinds of issues and challenges. So this is just my opinion, so I understand what you're saying.
But I want to address them so the committee understands what is our approach and what is our objective. Yes, like you said, we could find any other lot, that's even less challenging on our end, construction-wise, budget-wise, and other guidelines as well. But we feel that this is a really great spot for us. It can bring a lot of energy to the area, economy also, jobs to the area. That's one of the reasons we are trying to acquire also the mini golf and the Brickopolis. It's our understanding that if we could maintain the envelope, we would. But it has been clear to us from the assessments that it's, never mind the extra cost and challenge of securing, dressing up, and maintaining the envelope and anchoring it to the new structure that's going to be offset on the interior of the perimeter of the steel skeleton. So we have so many structural and architectural challenges if we maintain the envelope, right? But the priority to us is safety, because that is not stable, Even in the process of maintaining it and demoing the interior core, it is very frightening what can happen, even in the demolition stage, of what can happen with that envelope. Can we go somewhere else and do this? Yes. Can we make it a warehouse that stays at 3 levels? Yeah, but that's not our objective. Will it sit there for another 40 years, or I don't know how many years, to be empty and decrepit and in ruins and falling apart? Sure, we can move somewhere else and do this somewhere else. But we think it's a beautiful spot. We think it's got a lot of promise and energy, like I said, and it can bring a lot of other things that happen. I mean, if we go away with this project, we go away. We don't acquire the Brickopolis, we don't acquire and upgrade the mini golf next door, and other options that are being offered to us in the Bricktown area. So this, to us, is the jewel. This is where the takeoff is for other developments in Bricktown and around the area. It was never our intent to keep it a 3-level project. It was our intent to do a hotel versus multi-condominium, and we decided to do a hotel. I think our plans for the future, immediate future, is to develop this connection, the synergy with that hotel, other things that we're working with the Kingman as well, ownership, and also the mini golf and the Brickopolis. And we have other plans next door as well. But, but I understand where you're coming from. We wish, I mean, I did my master's in Italy in architecture. So part of my master's degree is urban design and maintaining the, the traditional and I worked with Renaissance buildings in Pisa and Florence. I lived in Florence for 2 years. So we wanted to maintain a lot of things. The problem is there's not really a lot to maintain with this specific structure. Now, if you were giving us the Kingman or across the canal from something else, but I ask you to go and walk the property with us and really witness up front and close and personal the condition that the building is. These pictures don't do that justice.
Yeah, I would just make one final comment. I absolutely actually understand. I mean, I've literally been walking this part of Bricktown since I was like 7 years old.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with the building. I remember when Margarita Mama's was actually a place. I've been inside it. I understand the challenges with the building itself. And I understand the reasons why this proposed use, the building would need to go. I don't actually disagree with that. My feedback is actually about the design that's being proposed.
Sure.
And how it relates to what is there, what will be destroyed for this building.
Yeah.
That's all. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
But I will say this, Joe, and we have talked to Michael. We are in the schematic phase right now. We haven't gone into the design development phase. And that's where you iron out a bunch of design details. We already agreed with Michael that any and all staff meetings that need to happen from here in between to submitting construction documentation, we're more than flexible to sit down and say, hey, you guys really need to bring something in so we can have that nostalgia, from that era that will identify something that stood here. We're more than happy to do that and keep the conversation going, make any changes to the design that we need to. We want this to happen, and so we welcome any and all type of direction from you guys as well.
So I think that comment gets to why we recommended a continuance. That level of design detail is what the committee needs to see to be able to approve a project. That level of design detail, as well as all of the issues that have been raised about overhanging property lines and projecting out into the right-of-way, et cetera. I think this is a great opportunity for feedback on the project, but from what I'm hearing from the committee and from what we've heard about some of the other issues with where things need to be addressed with adjacent property owners, with other city departments, that's why we felt a continuance was appropriate. There's just far too many things that are still hanging out there for it to be, in staff's opinion, for it to be an approval today. That's above and beyond what we would typically have a committee delegate to staff to wrap up.
Madam Chair, I'd like to ask a couple of questions.
Sure.
Well, and first, just say, it would be lovely to have something done with that piece of property. It's been in a state of disrepair for many, many years. So I don't think there would be any of us here that would want this not to happen. Sandino, I'm wanting to make for sure that I understand. I think they're wanting to remove the entire structure, and you're just suggesting that of that previously existing structure, you would like just a nod to something that was on that structure. So I wasn't sure because I've done construction on old buildings, and sometimes they're just not worth, it's too much money. So you do understand that Sandino was not suggesting you keep part of the building.
No, I understand.
Okay.
that, Yeah.
Then a couple of thoughts. One, the reflective surfaces of these pieces that you brought, does that affect anything across your neighbors across the canal? Or have you considered that?
No, because the harshest sun angles would be on the south and on the west side. So the east and the north, specifically the north, is where the easy on the eyes sun angle is. It doesn't affect it at all.
It's not going to cause your neighbors to wear sunglasses?
No.
Okay. Another thing, you mentioned that you had visited with Public Works, Parks. Was this just a casual agreement between you and those entities that so far so good? Because at the end of the day, they're going to have to submit something to you for
No,
permission.
it has to be done
Yeah.
officially with drawings.
So you're just saying that initial talks?
Right. I met with them. Some of them, most of them, met us on site, and we showed them the drawings that we have at this point.
Okay.
We went through and discussed every single item, signage, overhang, the roof overhangs.
So this was first blush?
Yeah, and they, I mean, per Michael's request to visit with all the departments, we thought some of the departments were supposed to be in charge of some of those items, but it ended up being most of those items and was confirmed by plan review that were under their bag.
Okay. Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, the revocable permit is where we're headed for that.
Okay.
So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Is this on? I think it's on. I have some quick questions. So I see on your site plan that the width of the site is 4911 and that your out of your building is 4911. I think you will need to accommodate an expansion joint between your new building and the Kingman building. You won't be able to butt right up against it. Yep. So I'm not sure how that affects, we use every square inch in our plan layouts. So I'd like to see that reflected in your next plans, if that's a request I can make. Because I think you're going to have that in there, and being 7/8 stories with next to a 4-story building, we're not talking about a 2-inch joint, especially what I see as the layout. It's probably 6-8 inches, something like that. And I think too that my big concern is once you lay in the structural system, how that affects your floor plans and even the visual look from the outside as to the pool itself. So I think my question there would be, after we get through a continuance and get this approved, what's the catalyst if that design feature out there with that pool starts changing and would look different than what we have rendered and conceptualized here? Does that ever come back? Because I think the answer is no. Okay. So that would be, I look forward to seeing once that's integrated with your consultants, because I think those elements are going to change a little bit. And then the concern for your floor plate being that you need to accommodate an expansion joint next to the Kingman. And the Kingman's there, so it gets property line to property line, but you're not going to have that same opportunity on your site. So it's going to make it even more narrow for you. And then the other item there, I love the idea of an event center and relating it to the Kingman. But I think there's also the feasibility there. It was probably a warehouse at its original state, the Kingman, so the change in occupancy use would be the concern for me, to make sure that you can accommodate that assembly load for an event space and not have significant retrofit required for the Kingman. And my thought there would be is if you go down that line, that thought process, that you might just nix that if it becomes too significant of a retrofit to the Kingman and too disruptive to the Kingman building. So do you have, and I'm not sure, I'll ask it and you can just tell me no, if you have someone that's along the ride for you for estimating this to make sure it's a feasible project. I think I love the idea of a boutique hotel. I agree, we want it here. But my concern is how expensive it's going to be in this modern day of labor costs and material costs. So have you started down that avenue at all yet?
Well, as far as the structural engineer has been kind of tagging along. Obviously, we haven't started him on it. So we're already in track of kind of having a pretty good idea of how we're going to do the structural, as far as the layout that we have for the current plans. Right now, adjacent to the Kingman, right now, there's only like an 8-inch, one of those clay tiles they used to have now. But if we do, now that we're planning on doing a brand new structure, obviously that will change the connection there. We do have the floor plan for the event center, by the way. We didn't have it revised when we submitted to you guys back then. But if you're interested in seeing, we can email that to you, and so you can take a look at that as well. I'm sorry, what was your second question there?
Oh, pricing. If you've got a price per square foot to make sure that it's a feasible project
Sure.
for you
Obviously,
all.
right now is just top of the head, since we haven't done the construction documents and initiated the bidding process or anything like that. But we're thinking about $30 million tag on that right now.
So you're going to do design, bid, build?
Yep.
Okay.
So that's kind of the direction right now.
Okay.
How many rooms is it?
We have 60 keys right now, 60 suites, 59. It ranges from, king size, regular to king size premium, which are on the ends with bigger suites. And then you have your double queens and premium as well. And then you have the count that you need for handicap ADA suites. And then you have the 1,000 square foot presidential on the rooftop level.
Michael, we've run into this before, where we approve a project and we approve demolition, and then the project doesn't move forward, and so we lose another potential redevelopment asset. I do think you're totally correct that there's no way you can save this building to put a 7-story hotel. It could be saved if it was a different building, right? And so my concern is if we approve demolition and you guys come back with pricing, and instead of 30 million, it's 40 million or whatever the number is, and you're like, it doesn't make sense to move forward, we're gonna need to pull the plug. Is there a way, Michael, to, I almost wouldn't want to approve demolition until there was financing in place and a deal in place to move forward. Can that happen or not?
So
Katie?
I'll say that, we really don't have a mechanism with any teeth to it to tie a demolition to what is proposed to follow the demolition. Once a demolition is approved, they can go forward with that, they can get their demolition permits, and whether it's 3 weeks or 6 months or however long, if they don't follow through on the new construction, we don't have a way to, we don't have a mechanism to tie the two together,
So
as much as we would like.
Could we do this then? Is there a way where you can approve the project but not approve demolition until they come back with capacity to close?
So I also think, and I'll defer to Dustin, but their financial situation is not this committee's purview. We don't have the authority to say, you have to come show me that you've got the money to do this project. Our review has to be based on whether or not we think that the demolition meets the applicable criteria and whether we think the new construction meets the applicable criteria. If they check all those boxes, then this committee should approve the project, even if we think there's no way they're going to get that done. There's no way they're going to be able to pay for it. If it meets our criteria that we are asked to consider, then our charge is to approve the project, and the financing of it is not this body's purview. I do think it's well within your purview to say we don't have enough information, we don't have enough detail to show that this is a fully fleshed out project from a design standpoint, that they've got all their ducks in a row, and we don't feel comfortable approving it till we know that this is actually the finished product that we're going to get. But yeah, I don't.
But I guess to ease your concern there, we would not start demolition until we get the project approved 100%. So it wouldn't be to our benefit to do that either.
So that's helpful. I mean, it sounds like everyone is on the same page at this table of a continuance. Is that a fair?
Can I request something? The only thing is that in the approach of goodwill on our end, is that we're eager to start this process pretty quick and work with you guys on fleshing out all the things that need to be resolved. For that to happen is for us to start the process of actually getting into design development and getting all the consultants, MEP, structural, everybody on board 100%, which means we have to pay them to get on board 100%. It would be beneficial for our process to start and initiate that so we can move forward if we can request something earlier than January, perhaps November, December, something that we can, and trust me, we've been waiting since July to start and getting all the consultants on board and start working on this thing.
Yeah, I think that's something if these items can be addressed on your end within that time frame, I think that was the concern, was just not having enough time to get all of these items addressed. But I think that's something we can talk about.
Okay.
But before we do move on, something also I did want to comment on quickly. I think I just echo everybody here that we love the idea of this. But in terms of your site design, I was just curious. I see that there's a canopy in kind of like that area, Wanda Jackson Way. Is that something that can be? Have we done that?
We talked to
vehicles.
We talked to plan review. I don't know. Is that question for me?
Yes, or yeah. Well, you can share. It's a question for how we've done that before, where we have that canopy laid over these kind of alleyways, and then. But you can comment on that.
What we got from plan review after we discussed this item with them is, I think it's because it's an alleyway. Their concern was more, Michael's too, obviously, everybody's. We see a lot of traffic of service trucks going that way. The Percopolis is on one end. You constantly see those trucks. So, we're flexible to move the height. Right now, we have it at 14 feet, which is clear. Any service truck, that's pretty tall. But if we need to move it,
Right, and I think that goes to one of the items that I just want to make sure that when it comes back that these things are addressed. But the dumpster enclosure, that's there, and
Yep.
I know all that. And then your parking, I don't know. When I look at your rendering over here that shows the south end, it's not really reflective of what's there. But are you guys, because there's an alley there and then there's the parking, are you also planning to upgrade that parking lot for parking, or what does that look like?
So we've had conversations with the Kingman ownership, and they've been having a lot of issues with their parking. It's not enough. So they actually asked us if we would partner up with them and create a parking garage. my dad works with Course Lab Structures, and that's what they do a lot. They do that for the Chickasaw. So these are conversations that are just floating right now on the surface. But at a minimum, we have already discussed relocating that trash enclosure somewhere else, and we would assist them. If not, it would probably be our undertaking to enclose it and make it, per the city, per code. And we know that it would be a different permit that we'd have to go through the Kingman building. But yes, we are, and I think this meeting is going to clarify a lot of things for us, so we can go back to them, say, okay, this is what they want us to do, or the direction that we need to take with that.
Wonderful. Is there any other comments from the committee in terms of continuance, timing-wise? We talked about like November maybe being a little too soon, but December was a possibility. I think staff felt comfortable with December.
Yeah, so the December meeting would be December 13th. The November meeting is November 8th, so less than a month away, and we would need new information submitted by Tuesday of next week. So that's an awfully tight turnaround to get any design changes, coordination with other city departments, that sort of thing.
Sure, I agree.
But December 13th is the next meeting after
And what
that.
is the submittal deadline for the December 13th?
So that would be the
7th of November.
Yeah, 7th of November.
Is that feasible?
Yes.
Are you able to answer these questions by
Yes.
November 7th in order to be heard at the December 13th? Did you have a comment?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Finish that thought, and then I'll.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We don't get to meet often, so we're like bumping into each other. I was flipping through Bricktown, and I think the only thing that's standing out to me, the finishes I like a lot. The one that I think might be the most glaring in Bricktown would be the amount of louver above and below the windows. So if they are serving a purpose or not, can you enlighten us on that? And if there's any way to even just consider minimizing the amount of louver, because I'm just seeing on so much of the other Bricktown buildings, even though the window panels are smaller in Bricktown because they are older buildings, they just don't have as much louvers on the rest of the building. I think that's the most design-wise for the context in it.
So the louver, every hotel has a unit at the window. So our take was, and this is not just a louver company. I didn't have a sample to show you because they just they fabricate for the need for that specific project. It's nothing that they have a standard for. But it's an architectural company that provide and manufacture these grill louver types of metal panels. So they're more attractive, they're more aesthetic pleasing. But the conversation we've had is that, we can provide that at the window, below the window, but above the window, we can provide something a little bit different that will be more of a better composition for the other materials. So that's still, and we can definitely provide you with that update in the next meeting that we have. It has to do with mechanical.
Sure, yeah. They're individual units in the rooms,
But the reason we were using it also above the windows to kind of composition-wise. But yes, that's something that we're in conversations with my client.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think, do we want to make a motion to continue this item? Can I make the motion?
December.
I'll make a motion to continue item.
The chair, I believe, cannot make the motion.
Okay,
Somebody
that's what I
other than
was-
you has
okay.
to do it.
I'll make
Yeah,
the
can
motion.
somebody make the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, yeah, there we go. All right, to December 13th.
Yes. I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Dodson and seconded by Egan. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for your time.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
everybody.
Thank you so much for your
Appreciate
time.
it.
Okay, we have another item on the agenda.
All right, this is a case BCA 23-0008. It is located at 2 Northeast 2nd Street, which is basically I'm surprised it even has an address on 2nd Street, although it does have some frontage. It's basically in the middle of the block that's bounded by E.K. Gaylord and the railroad tracks, Main Street on the south, Northeast 2nd on the north, and the Walnut Street Bridge on the east. This site may look, and probably does look, familiar to most of you on the committee because we had the same project before you back in 2020. And in fact, the more that I think about it, this probably could have been put on your consent docket, except for the fact that there's a variance attached to the project. But I did describe in detail for you in the report that back in 2020, when you saw it, the committee did provide a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment on that variance, and that variance was approved already. So as a consequence, you don't have to worry about making a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment today because the variance that is necessary, and it's related to the amount of building footprint on the lot, has already been approved by the Board of Adjustment, and it's still in effect for this use. And I don't know if you recall, but just a little bit of background on why they needed the variance for the building footprint, or the amount of lot coverage actually is what it is. Number one, I don't think you'd want a parking structure that covered this big a piece of property. And number two, you couldn't do it anyway because there are several easements that constrict the building footprint of this particular parking structure. And for that reason, that's probably why the committee recommended approval of the variance, and that's probably also why the Board of Adjustment approved the variance for that issue. So with that issue being off the table, what you have before you is a new proposal for a 6-level parking garage. It's in the orange space that you see on the screen here. That's the location on the subject site of the particular parking garage. It's set up to take access internally from the west side and the south side for entrance, entrance on the south side only, exit on the east side only, and entrance and exit on the west side. There are gates, control gates at both of the entry points on the south and the west side. We did have a conversation with the applicant on the positioning of those gates and the potential for stacking distance becoming a problem, but because the stacking occurs all on private property and not on any public street, it's their problem, not ours. So we did cover that base when we reviewed the project. It's virtually all brick. The first level has an interesting composition of CMU block with brick accents on it, which I guess has been done in other projects in the vicinity. And so that provides the screening there. The only issue we really came up with on this particular project with respect to the design of it is the lack of screening that's been provided on the north side of the building. And the way the code reads, it talks about the cars being screened from view from the street. Now, this project, as you can see on the orange square, does not actually front on Northeast 2nd, but between some buildings that are on the south side of Northeast 2nd Street, you more than likely will be able to see from Northeast 2nd on that street views into the north side of this particular building. And for that reason, we did discuss with the applicant the possibility of adding screening to the north side of the building. They have proposed screening on the south side, and I would say probably about 60 to 75% of the east side. They have not done any screening on the west side because it faces the railroad tracks. And then for the north side, that's the area of contention right now, is that we believe that it would probably be best if we do have at least half-height screening to screen the vehicles, if not full-side screening like they provided on the south side. We had hoped that the applicant would provide us with some, I don't know, sketches to show the committee what it would look like with half-height screening or with full-height screening, and the only elevation you have now in front of you is an elevation on the north side with no screening proposed. So I don't think that there's, I mean, the code doesn't say you have to screen it from residential units. That was our initial concern because you have a lot of 4-story structures on the north side of Northeast 2nd Street, and those people in those apartments will be looking directly at the north side of this building, probably over some of the lower scale buildings that are on the south side of Northeast 2nd. But that's what the code says. The code says from the street. So by and large, there are buildings on the south side that will block the view to the north side of this elevation of this structure. But there are gaps in those buildings along the south side of the street where, if you're driving along the street, you would be able to see the north elevation. And for that reason, we think there probably should be at least half-height screening on the north side of the building, and that's our recommendation to you on this project. So with that, I think I've completed my presentation for you today, and we're prepared to respond to any questions that the committee may have.
Do we have a representative of, or the client present? Applicant present, sorry.
I'm Scott Dedman with ADG Blatt Architects, and we have visited with Michael a couple of times on this. The whole concept of this garage is really for it to not look like a garage with brick on it, but to look like a repurposed warehouse. And so that's why you see a strong front facade, and then as you turn corners, it's more utilitarian, and you see the concrete framework with some brick infill. So we've been really intentional about how we've designed that. And that kind of goes with that open side as well. And I brought some sketches like Michael was talking about with the half-height screening, and we can consider that. But we really like the feel of having that variety when you turn the corner and it opens up, and I mean, it is a warehouse. It's a warehouse with cars in it, but it's open. And when you look across, and it just provides a more open facade. And frankly, in our opinion, it feels better. So that's really the main thought. So we have brought brick samples and things like that too, if you want to see those. But it is a brick that's been approved in Bricktown as well. So happy to answer any questions.
Could you pass the sketches? Sure. Sorry, I'll have to hit, yeah.
So, you know, once you add the brick in, that whole facade just becomes very monolithic. And we do have people looking onto that side, and we really like the variety and the openness of just having the cable rail. Now, what Michael was talking about on the CMU, that is just used on the lower level of the north side, the west side, and a portion of the east, I believe. And what that is, it just takes the CMU, it turns it sideways so that we get ventilation, but we also have security on the ground floor. And it's used in a random pattern and with some brick inserts in that as well that creates sort of this random pattern, more decorative.
Go ahead, if there's any comments from the committee?
Yes, I've got comments. First of all, I think this is stunning. I mean, for what the project is, I really appreciate like what you guys have put together. I think probably my only question, and you answered it well, so I don't even know that I have kind of an opinion, but I do think there's something to be said, because I'm very familiar with the lot and walking sort of along Second Street there.
Right.
So I just kind of, I go back and forth on the same sort of points I think that even the
Yeah.
staff report mentioned
I
about
like
the
what, I
screening.
liked what you said earlier today
Yeah.
about Bricktown and the variety of things that you find there.
Yeah, no, and this is actually a perfect example of like why I think it's important. Like this is great.
Yeah.
So so your thoughts on the screening? I mean, you're kind of saying, like, yeah, we have the ordinance and the interpretations of the things, but you actually like that. You think this feel is more is gonna works better, right?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. I mean that's really my only question. I think the rest of this, what you guys did with the ground floor and kind of that variety, like I actually really appreciate the thoughtfulness to. I mean, I wish every garage we got in Bricktown looked like this. Yeah.
Michael, can you remind me again, what was the concern with staff with the screening being on the north side? Was there a guidance that we have to follow, or?
I mean, the code requires that for parking garages, that the elevations are screening views of parked vehicles at every level of the parking garage from all canal and street level views. And that's what we keyed in on because we're almost certain, and we probably should have gone out and taken some pictures, but I don't know, we would be taking pictures of air. There's no story poles or anything out there to show, where the building's located or how tall it is from when it's viewed from Second Street. But we're almost convinced, 100% convinced, that there are places along Second Street where the north side of this elevation or the north side of this structure would be visible from the street. So to not provide that screening is in violation of that regulation, and it's not a guideline, it's a regulation. So if we were to not provide the screening, then we're looking at a variance. So, and that's actually something I overlooked in the report because I didn't think that we would be at that point. I figured that there'd be some sort of a compromise where we get at least half-height screening that would address the issue.
I don't disagree with Michael that it can be seen from Second Street, it will be, but it's also separated by the railroad trestle and the railroad tracks as well. So it is obviously the back of a building, not a street-facing building.
I think our concern is a little bit if you go a little bit further east, like where, I guess, Oklahoma intersects Second Street, maybe?
Yeah. So let me ask the question though, just in regards to what was being said, because this is kind of helping me sort of. I mean, I could kind of go either way because I walk this way all the time, so I understand exactly what's being said, and I think it's right. I think you will see that. But are we also continuing with like just whether we're in the back of a building, right? I.e., I mean, you can see it from Second Street, but you're really at the railroad tracks, right? Is that so? As far as the need for a variance, I guess that's also. I'm just trying to make sure I understand that interpretation too.
Yeah. Right.
I think that the concern for staff is that, this is a regulation, it's not a guideline. So we don't have the ability to be real flexible on what it says or to identify a unique circumstance or condition. And it says, shall be designed to screen views of parked vehicles, from all canal and street level views. It doesn't say if it's the back or if it's at the street or if it's within X number of feet of the street. It says from street views. So I think if we think that it's going to be visible from Second, then the requirement is that it be screened. Or that they seek a variance.
Or a variance
Right.
we seek. And so, and the difference so that makes it, so then the difference though in the west end is that we're saying the street views are blocked by the viaduct.
Right.
I mean, kind of unequivocally.
Yeah.
So if it was like 7 stories, then we'd say like the 6th and 7th story might need to be screened.
It'd have to be probably 15 stories to be visible from Gaylord, I would imagine.
Okay, all right.
So I think what I'm hearing is if we think that the look of this is something that is in character with Bricktown as a committee, then we can approve this, but he would have to seek Or does he have to get a variance approved before we can?
Yeah, that's the issue. We did not publicly notice this as a variance, and it's not brought up in the staff report as requiring a variance. So if we don't get screening in some form, either half height or full height at this meeting, then it's probably something you'd have to continue, and would bring it back for a recommendation that would include the variance aspects of it, and that another motion for you to make to the BOA to recommend approval of the variance if you think that's appropriate.
Scott, like if we did a conditional approval for you to do half height on that second, would you be, I mean, what do you want? Do you want us, it sounds like our hands are tied in terms of we either need to do a continuance so that we can apply for a variance? or you
Yeah,
can
we'd rather not have a continuance.
So if we don't do that, are you okay if we conditionally approve it based upon you adding half height on the second floor?
Yeah, we would be okay with that. I mean, I really feel like we end up with a better project without it.
So I think
but-
design-wise, we like it not being screened. We agree with you. It's just a matter of your timing, and if you are okay with continuing, then you can keep that look.
So I have another sneaky suggestion. We could approve today with the
Right.
condition that the screening be included, and you can immediately submit a revision to that to not include the screening, and in November so you could get going with an approved certificate of approval to move on to your
then
next
go for the
steps,
variance
and then
to
in the
make-
interim come back, revise the design, and get a variance from the Board of Adjustment if that's what everyone ultimately wants to see.
Yeah.
I like it as it is.
I do too.
So it wouldn't detain you much at all if we took this
Yeah.
suggested route, would it?
No, it wouldn't. I guess my confusion is the fact that our property line is not on the street right of way. I mean, our property line
And it
is.
sounds like the regular, and I mean, obviously, we all defer to the
Yeah,
interpretation of the staff,
but-
right? But it sounds like they're saying
Doesn't matter.
the
as long as
canal,
there's
it's
a
not
view.
the street, it's the street view. And which is what I was even clarifying with talking about the viaduct in my fictional 15-story now building. So from that standpoint, like, I think we just want to be expeditious. I think you guys have a great design.
Just as is, correct?
Yeah.
So we're just trying to figure out how to follow rules, but move forward
But I think we
now.
have to approve it right with the second floor screening so that he can then
Undo and come
undo it.
back.
Yeah.
Boy, wow.
Sounds like a rule maybe we can work on.
Since there's a technicality that it's
Yeah.
really talking
Is
about
there
from
a
street
comment?
view. It's,
Go ahead, we have
Hi,
another.
Jim Couch, and I'm a consultant at Bank First on this project for the applicant. And I would ask you to consider, the street view, and Michael is a trained expert in this area, I understand that. But Second Street is elevated, there's a railroad track in between, there's buildings on the south side. He said the view from the east side of Second Street. The east side of Second Street has shipping containers on the south side. So I guess it's the view over the shipping containers that we're concerned about to see that seems a little, it's
I think we are tied because we cannot, since there is a view from the street on Second Street, we are tied to that regulation that we have to follow.
I think we would argue that it's an insignificant view. Most of it is screened off. And so if there's any view any place, is that where it kicks in? That seems to be somewhat onerous. If that's the interpretation, that's,
Can,
interpretation.
Jim or Scott, can either of you speak to this image and where and to how high we would be seeing the building? I know it's a little difficult looking at this because it's not squared to the street.
Yeah.
It would be kind of coming in at an angle along.
And the reason it's not square is because of the easement that has to be in there for the potential future railroad line.
Yeah.
I think it's even in the third page of their attachment where they've put in the trestle that you would see what the view would really look like on the third page of the attachment. So unfortunately, proof of the guidelines, it's visible from the street because of the height and the transparency of the trestle. So that's where we're tied, where it is a street level view that we would have to, the guidelines say to screen.
Yeah, and I would suggest,
At the back end, Katie.
sorry.
Oh, in that document, okay.
Yeah, and I would suggest like really trying to be expeditious because there are instances where I understand what this regulation on the parking garages is trying to obtain. I also understand like what you guys are presented. So I think right now it's procedural. Like if we approved it as is without anything else, it sounds like you would then still have to go and resubmit for a variance. It would take more time. That's what but I think it's the interpretation of the staff and the counselor's office, not ours. I just want to make sure we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and we can give a recommendation from you all to be allowed to have the variance then, so. Yeah, I know, that would be fine, just extra steps.
Well, and Scott, to your point, I think there's many instances of this when you're trying to do construction. Sometimes it's form over substance.
Right.
And I think we're all just saying, we like it just like it is. We just don't want to all end up in trouble because we didn't follow a rule.
Sure, no, I understand.
And so it's really not the committee that, we're bound by rules and regulations,
Sure.
that's all.
Right.
I think staff doesn't want to put the committee in the position of the next time a parking garage comes in that does not have adequate screening and that is not well-designed, that you've kind of gone down that path of being more squishy on evaluating the visibility and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I just want to make sure I'm correctly interpreting your interpretation back to Mr. Karchmer when
We like it as is.
So I think
Thank
we can get a motion to approve it with the half screening, if that's right. If
Yeah.
somebody wants to make that motion.
I'd move to approve what's been presented at a half screening, with half screening, so it will meet the regulations. I also think there's support for you all relooking at your design if you so desire.
Okay.
Get a second. Okay, and the motion passes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 7, other business. We have the 2024 Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting calendar. Michael, did you want to address that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. This is something we do every November or October or September, because being as we've met so few times this year, we obviously want to take the advantage of having this meeting to make sure that we got this issue taken care of, not knowing if we were going to have a November or December meeting. But since we do have on the agenda, it is essentially a carbon copy of the meeting schedule for 2023, with the exception of the dates being changed. The meeting days are always going to remain Wednesday at 9 a.m. The deadlines for those applications to be submitted for those meetings is always the Tuesday prior to a meeting date. So, for example, yesterday was a deadline for November's meeting, and that pattern holds true in this 2024 schedule. So we're just recommending that the committee adopt this calendar, and then we can pass it on to the city clerk's office for posting.
Can I get a motion to approve the 2024 Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting calendar?
We're racing, yes. I'll motion to approve the calendar for 2024.
And I have a hard stop in 5 minutes, so I want to make sure we approve anything else that we need to, because I think if I leave,
This is the last item.
is this last, okay, great.
Get a second.
As long as you don't dilly-dally.
Yeah.
And you all lucked out and did not have any weird holidays that adjusted
Okay,
your,
and the calendar.
No, we
you don't have to do any funny stuff to your calendar next year.
The next item is item number 8, communications. Is there anything that you would like to share about the administrative report, Michael?
Well, other than the fact that this report, this administrative approval report, reflects the same level of activity we've had at the committee level. For us to be out of operation for 9 months, the first 9 months of the year, and have only 8 administrative approvals is a pretty slow level of activity. But it's all pretty much your standard, some signage and various things that are, pretty minor with respect to, and they're all in compliance with the standards that apply in Bricktown. So that's why they were approved administratively by staff. Gosh, I think the last one on the list here, 06, was probably approved by staff maybe back in July or August. That's how slow it's really been. So we were really excited to see these 2 items that you had on your agenda for you today. So that's really about it. And we haven't honestly had much in the way of anybody else talking to us about submitting anything else in the near future either. There is one project that they're talking about on the north side of the canal that is a renovation of an existing building. I'm not sure if it's Chelino's or the one next, or the building next to that, but there's somebody out there. It's got their brain working on some projects out there, but there's not a lot of activity. So.
I would note, and maybe this is from planning department staff, if you're walking around in the district and you do see work going on that hasn't come before you, and that maybe you've scrolled through the administrative approval report that goes out once a week, we don't have capacity to be patrolling the district for work. So if you see something and you're kind of curious about whether it got approved, feel free to shoot Michael an email, shoot me an email, take a picture with your phone, text it to us. Because we do want to stay on top of things that are going on in the district if there is work going on without approval.
Yeah. Thank you for letting us know that, Catherine. And is there any additional comments from the planning department staff?
Well, we've been eagerly waiting to introduce you to Keith Daniels.
For 9 months.
9 months.
Yeah, exactly. Desiree left us in late last year, and Keith's been with us the whole time since. So he's been a great addition to our staff, and we're looking forward to continuing working with him.
Thank you. Welcome,
Yeah, welcome.
Keith. It's nice to meet you and see you. Any comments from committee members? No, we're trying. Anything else? Okay, this
I'm
is
excited to have a little activity that we can meet and talk about. That's fun.
Yeah, I would
So
like
we're going to have some in December, right? Okay.
Right, so we don't have a meeting in November likely because the deadline was yesterday.
We will have a meeting in November to address the variance
Oh, that's right.
on the parking garage.
Oh my gosh, how exciting.
So then,
Well, that'll probably be a very, very quick meeting, and like I said, yesterday was a deadline for the November meeting, and we didn't receive anything else, so that would be the only item on the agenda.
okay. So the next meeting date will be November 8th, 2023.
Yes.
Okay, I think this is the longest Bricktown meeting that I've been a part of since I've joined. So we will adjourn at 10:54.